Hello, and welcome to the Proactive Caregiving Podcast. As a CPA with over 20 years as an industry accountant, Jessica stepped away from the corporate world to become a full-time caregiver for her mother. Having learned invaluable lessons along the way, she is now here to share those with you and to invite you to join her on this caregiver's journey. Here is your host, Jessica Cannon.
Hello there. I am the Proactive Caregiver, and I specialize in educating others on how to be proactive by empowering you, the caregiver. If you cannot take care of yourself, then you cannot take care of your loved one. And what better way to learn how to do this than to learn from other caregivers? I'm talking about those who wanted to run away, but stayed the course out of love or even marital obligation, regardless of potential burnout. The unmentioned heroes working a thankless, emotionally, financially, and even spiritually draining role out of love. Today's interview is with caregiver advocate, LVN, and radio talk show host of Chatting with Betsy on Passionate World Talk Radio. We get her personal experiences of how dementia affected her life and marriage. She also shares how denying caregiver support from the medical industry makes everyone connected suffer even more. Check this out. Because one thing I've learned more frequently and over the last couple of years with dealing with mom and feeling alone is that we are stronger together. So this will make a difference for so many more people.
So true, Jessica. Because before I went on Facebook in 2014, I was alone for 14 years with no support.
And it's very isolating.
Yes, when I tell you I went crazy joining support groups, I went nuts. And I was so happy in a twisted way to find people having the same problems as me.
Right.
Feeling the same way and finally feeling I am not alone.
Exactly.
There's people that are having the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and it may be different just because some are with spouses caring and some are with their parents or even other relatives or siblings, but it still comes down to that feeling, being identified that as a caregiver that we all are kind of experiencing these problems, these issues, and feeling the same ways.
Yes. Everyone's situation might be different, but there's a lot of similarities.
Yes.
Every loved one is different, but I tell you what, there wasn't a lot of information when my mother-in-law had it, 2000. Not a lot with my father, 2008. Not a lot with Matt, 2010. There's a lot of information now for caregivers. And when I got information, and I was prepared for Matt's hallucinations. I wasn't prepared for my mother-in-law. I didn't know that was part of the disease.
Right.
I didn't handle it right. I used to feel guilty about it, but there wasn't information. I looked for it, but there wasn't any.
Sadly enough, that's kind of how I felt now myself. And it just seems like the information that's coming out now, thankfully it's coming out now, but for others, it just feels like it was too little too late, but yeah. we can make a difference. So you just mentioned your mother, your father, Matt. So how far back, when did dementia start to actually touch your life?
2000.
Wow.
Well, actually, 1999, we moved in with my mother-in-law. Unknown to us that she had started to show signs of dementia. And she was showing it. She would tell me, I'm getting like my mother. Matt's grandmother had it, dementia, that wasn't called Alzheimer's back then.
Right.
And she said, I'm getting like my mother, but don't tell Matt. And I would argue with Matt, take your mother to the neurologist. Your mother needs to go. And he would say, why don't you take her? I go, well, I could take her, but you have power of attorney. I can't make medical decisions. You need to get diagnosed. And she would have like these angry outbursts and yell at me, accuse me of not paying her rent, accuse me of stealing. Um, she, I didn't know this until later. She told everybody was stealing from her house. She thought I told Josh to take her annuities. Um, and nobody called to tell us anything.
Of course not.
One day I was sleeping because I worked nights. She came down screaming at me like a lunatic, and accused me of stealing. I was like, what? I was so shocked. And I told Matt, your mom has a change in behavior. She needs to be checked. And the thing, Jessica, is a lot of people don't realize this. When one partner or spouse in a relationship doesn't support the other one, it makes things hard. And I'm very honest and I'm very blunt. It ruined our marriage because it was his mother, but he wasn't supporting me.
Right.
I had to get after him and it would cause fights. And he made me the enemy, not the Alzheimer's. He made me the enemy,
right.
Which people shouldn't do.
No.
It's not good. People need to work together as a team, get counseling. And I said, Matt, it'd be a lot better if you worked with me than against me.
Right.
He didn't want to realize his mother was getting worse. And I told him, your mother needs more care than what we could give her. And he didn't really want to place her. And then the team said to Matt, you need to place your mom. She needs more care. And if you don't give it to her, replace her, that is neglect. You can be charged with elder abuse. I went, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Make the doctor the enemy.
Yes. Well, I definitely faced that situation myself. And that was my wake-up call when I was in denial and not wanting to deal with it. And I had a nurse tell me something similar to that I think you think you're doing well, but this is what we call senior neglect. And wow, that was like she could have thrown a glass of ice water in my face. It was, the reality check of, there's things we have to deal with and we can't be in denial.
Yes. And Matt was in denial. How old is your mom?
She is now 72.
Oh, she's young.
Very young. But she's been in this situation for many years. It's just because we were in that space of denial for a long time as well.
You know what? It's so difficult. My mom was in denial about my father, who had dementia. And my brother, my older brother, who has passed away last year, he was having memory issues before he died. And my mom was in denial about that also. And the neurologist, Jessica, if I could have reached into the phone and knocked him upside the head, I would have. It's so mind-boggling to me that in the year 2021, when my brother went, the end of 20 and into 21, that doctors could be that arrogant and ignorant. Oh, dementia just doesn't show up all of a sudden. No, of course not. It's been a year since he's like this.
Yeah.
But my mom didn't want to realize that. She blamed it on an eye problem. And I told her it's not an eye problem. Because my brother's friend called me and he said, Betsy, Bradley's been having memory issues. Your mom needs to take him to a doctor. And I said, well, call up my mother because she doesn't listen to me. And, she took him to a neurologist and he was like, well, his attitude was like, well, so if it is dementia, it's nothing we can do anyway. We'll wait and see. And I said, did you tell the doctor that he's been like this? Did you tell him that Bradley's diabetic, had stents, and maybe he has vascular dementia,
Right.
possibly. Maybe it's both. Ask him what he knows about dementia. She goes, Betsy, I'm not like you. I can't fight with him. I said, well, give me the phone. I'll talk to him. Or she wouldn't, because I'm an embarrassment. I'm the black sheep of the family.
Hey, sometimes it's the black sheep of the family that gets stuff done, huh?
Yeah. And it, I just felt really bad for my brother. And when he went in the hospital, he was having memory issues, and all he wanted to do was go home. He wasn't allowed visitors, and it ended up that he did not have COVID. He had a mitral valve problem. How they did not know that when he goes to the doctor all the time, I'll never understand that. He ended up having to be transferred up to another hospital, have a procedure done. He never got off the ventilator. He developed pneumonia and sepsis. And I didn't agree with how my younger brother handled it, but he had power of attorney. He didn't tell my mother everything that was going on.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't think that was right.
No.
He said, oh, I want to give her hope. Well, you know what? I come from the school. Here's plan A. Here's plan B. We hope for plan A, but this is also what could happen.
Right.
Prepare for it. She was shocked. She thought he was going home. She actually thought he was going to recover. She was stunned to know that he was dying. And they my brother couldn't have visitors until right as he was dying. They took the ventilator off, and my mother had to see her son die. I said goodbye to my brother over the phone. It's awful. It's awful to say goodbye to someone that way.
Yeah, it is heartbreaking.
Yeah. And it bothered me. What was my brother thinking that nobody was there for him? Mm-hmm. Was he wondering where were we?
Right.
And I understand why people who had loved ones who died during COVID or go into a state of depression and do need help, because there's you weren't allowed to grieve properly.
Right.
You couldn't say goodbye a lot of times. And I'm grateful. This might sound terrible. I am so glad God took Matt before COVID. I am so grateful for that, because they weren't even allowing people to go into the hospice. And if I couldn't have been there for Matt, I think that would have broken me completely. I really do.
I'm glad you were able to have that time with him too. So tell me a little bit about Matt. When did you begin to suspect some symptoms might be related to dementia, or his behaviors could have been related to dementia?
Here's this picture.
Oh.
I noticed this is one night we went to a concert and he went up on the curb. I said, what are you doing? It was dark. Oh, I didn't see it. He forgot how to go somewhere, which I can understand, you kind of justify, reason. Right. Well, if I go somewhere in a long time, I might forget how to get there too. Mm-hmm. So you kind of, not a big deal. But it was interesting because they were adding a left-hand lane on a major road here. Matt grew up in this area, lived in this area his whole life. Mm-hmm. Building a left lane, adding a left lane confused him. I couldn't figure out why. I said, you just go straight, Matt. You know to go straight. He would avoid it. He was always absent-minded, but he was getting more absent-minded. I had to remind him of his keys, his lunch. He locked himself out of the car one time. He told me he forgot how to do something at work. And I didn't know till later that people at work were seeing that he was having problems, a difficulty at work. But because of HIPAA laws, they weren't allowed to tell me. And I would ask Matt, how are you functioning at work? And he didn't answer me. And then I was in the hospital in November of 2009 for 2 weeks. And that was interesting because Josh said to me, I had to help daddy in McDonald's. I said, what do you mean? He didn't know how to order. I
Oh,
said, what do you
wow.
mean you didn't know how to order? He goes, I had to help him order. He didn't know what to do. That's interesting. Then Matt asked me for money. He didn't have any money. I said, write out a check. He goes, I don't know how. And I went, what do you mean? Here I am in the hospital, right? What do you mean you don't know how? You know how to write out a check? You did it for your mom. You know how. So I had to explain it to him.
Oh, wow.
And that a month later, he went in the hospital. And I told his doctor he's having memory problems. He blew me off. No, that can't be. I didn't know that Matt's company told him to go to a doctor. They were concerned about him.
Mm-hmm.
And I did take him to a neurologist. First, he wouldn't go, and then he went. His first MRI was abnormal, showed global shrinkage with non-specified white spots. His brain waves, his EEG was abnormal. And the doctors did not want to say he had Alzheimer's. His company doctor, I'm very grateful that his company didn't fire him, that they liked him. They knew something was wrong with him.
Right.
He worked there for 14 years.
Oh, wow.
Something wasn't right. I was the first spouse to sit in on a disability meeting. The doctor, company doctor, who I don't know if she saw him in person or not, because Matt didn't tell me anything, suspected dementia. And she was hoping it would be the reversible type, due to thyroid or vitamin deficiency.
Right.
But she feared it wasn't. She didn't say any test results to Jessica. She didn't see any MRIs, but she had that feeling. And she was right. First Mets company put him out on short-term disability. Hopefully he would find out what was wrong, be able to get back, but he wasn't able to. I was devastated. I sat there at that meeting crying. I could not believe it. Yeah. And I said to Matt, do you know any of this? He goes, well, they say so. He didn't remember. He did not remember. He made a big mistake that cost the company a lot of money. So I'm really glad they didn't fire him. And when I took him to the doctors, neurologist, I was told he's too young. He's too young.
Yes.
The neuropsychologist, and this is before his disability meeting, before I knew what was happening at work, tested Matt. And she said, oh, he can't be that bad. He was non-compliant. I just love how they blame the person who has a memory problem.
Right.
Not trying enough. I've heard this over and over again, Jessica, from many caregivers, that they blame the person.
Right.
They don't want to realize, this person is coming to you for memory problem. Now, 2010, I didn't know what I know now. So I didn't question her. Matter of fact, I yelled at Matt for not being cooperative. And he said, I was cooperative, Betsy. I couldn't remember what she showed me. When I look back, if someone's calling you for memory loss, why won't you believe them?
Right.
And so that made me mad. I was very angry at the medical community for dismissing us, for how they treated us. And when Matt's primary doctor got the note from the company doctor, he called me up. And he went, holy blank, Betsy, what the heck's going on? I can't believe this. I said, well, I told you back in December. That was like May. I told you in December when Matt was in the hospital, was having memory problems, and you didn't listen to me. And this is the thing that I have found, not just with Matt, but in my own healthcare, doctors don't listen. Yes, there are very good doctors who do listen. When a doctor doesn't listen, it's really sad. When they don't believe you. So when Matt asked me what time Sunday school was, that he taught for over 20 years, I said, are you serious? Because he used to joke around. He goes, yeah, what time Sunday school? I said, 9:30. He goes, what time is it? I said, well, look at your watch. What time does it say? He didn't know how to tell time.
Yeah.
And I went, okay, that's not depression. Went back to the
Right.
neurologist. I said, listen, Matt doesn't tell time Sunday school was. He taught for over 20 years. Doesn't know how to tell time. Don't tell me that's depression. His
Right.
mom, and good thing Matt's mom had Alzheimer's and his grandmother, so I knew it wasn't a family. I said, he's got Alzheimer's. His mother and grandmother had it. Call it what it is. Get him on medication.
Mm-hmm.
And still, Jessica, no support, no saying, okay, do this or do that. I hope a day comes. I hope it's soon when there could be a pamphlet in a doctor's office.
Right.
And they can guide a caregiver and say, this is what you need to do. Here's resources for you. My neurologist is starting to do that now. He told me, like, his wife is a psychiatrist here in New Jersey. We have COPSA, which they screen people, and there's a whole team, and they have caregiving support. But, if people don't know about resources, they don't know. They don't even know what's in their own backyard. I know I didn't. And if I didn't, there's thousands of other people who don't know.
Right, exactly. And that's the problem, is getting this information out. And that's why I believe what caregivers will teach each other before the medical industry will begin to change.
Oh, absolutely. I learned, about the red plate. I learned how to, Matt had trouble getting into the bathtub because, the depth perception. So someone told me to get a bright bath mat, which I did.
Mm-hmm.
And then Matt was able to see that. I learned about how to handle hallucinations.
That's
I was
big.
prepared, for Matt. This is why I say, Jessica, I tell caregivers, and I am from New Jersey, and I am very blunt and straight up. There's no excuse for a caregiver now not to be educated. No excuse at all.
Right.
I don't want to, it's like, I don't even want to hear, I'm too busy, I don't have time.
Right.
Because if you could binge on Netflix, you better binge on a Chief of Snow video or whoever else giving information. I worked outside the home. I ran a group. I did a show. But I wanted to educate myself. And the caregivers, you have to want to educate yourself, because when you're educated, you're less stressed. Your loved one's going to be less stressed. And you're going to know what to expect.
Exactly. That is so true. And so once we get past this denial stage and we realize this isn't, like you said, it's not depression, because that's what we did as well. We wanted to blame something else and not even consider that it could be a mental health issue. But she was always tired, that kind of thing. She didn't have a good breakfast, or she didn't have a good dinner the night before. There was always reasons why we could explain things. But until you reach that point that you finally accept something could be wrong, the next step is getting as much education as possible, but making it easy so that we're not instead of spending time with our loved ones, we're not spending hours and days Googling whatever we can on the internet and make sense of whatever comes out, that all the medical jargon that sometimes is just way up here. And, what does that actually mean? How is this? How do I take this and use it to help my loved one?
Yes. Back in 2010, there wasn't really much. I will say, since the pandemic, there is more information because people couldn't travel. So there was so many webinars, so many seminars on that there was a lot available. Now, there are a lot of quacks out there. So people have to be careful of misinformation, because there are vultures, I call them, who like to prey on the vulnerable. And people are looking for a cure, and they will grasp at anything.
Right.
And so you have to kind of sift through the whack jobs, I call them. But there's a lot of good people out there.
There are.
And Tipa Snow is one of them. I learned a lot from her. A matter of fact, I couldn't figure out why Matt couldn't see right in front of him.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say, why can't you see that? It's right in front of you. And when I watched Cheapa Snow's video on vision, then I understood that Matt's vision was tunnel and he couldn't see at a certain level or on the sides. So I stopped yelling at him or getting frustrated, with him because I understood. But when you're not educated, you do get easily frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what, Jessica? There's no perfect caregiver, okay?
Oh, no.
Definitely not a perfect caregiver. We learn as we go.
Exactly. I'm still learning.
And you know what? I had learned until Matt's death that I learned. And I like to tell people the mistakes that I made so that they don't make them.
Right. Exactly. And that is part of the approach that I take with a proactive caregiver is if you know this stuff going in and you have the education, then you can avoid certain areas.
Yes.
So now, hindsight, were you able to actually get a diagnosis for Matt before he passed?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because I put my foot down after he couldn't tell time. And I said, get him treated. So then he said, oh, he has Alzheimer's. They don't really like to say that because they would prefer for the person to have had a brain biopsy, but you can't get that until you're dead.
Right.
Matt did it on the spinal tap. They can't tell by a spinal tap, but he was going to go for that. And I wasn't going to force him.
Yeah.
I wouldn't go for it myself either. But I knew he had it. And matter of fact, I knew he was going to get it young because I had that intuition. And I told him, I believe you're going to get it young, but I didn't know you could get in your 50s and younger. I didn't know that. I was thinking 60. And apparently the doctors didn't know either here where I live, but they're learning more now. And you know what, Jessica? Of course, Matt was depressed. Maybe your mom had depression.
Oh, yes.
Let's face it. If you can't remember, you can't drive, you can't do your job, you don't know where things are in the house, wouldn't you be depressed? Absolutely. I was depressed watching it. So it goes hand in hand. And I think doctors need to listen. And I wish I had hired someone to help me navigate the hospice process.
Mm-hmm.
I had to fight even for Matt to have proper end of life care. Unfortunately, I had the home hospice from hell experience. And again, no one listens. Why?
No, I think from my experience, I believe people struggle with listening because they don't know the answers themselves. And being able to say, I don't know, as a professional is hard. So not listening to us is just their way of saying we don't know this. And that's in some of the things that I was learning is that many of the doctors that are out practicing, and even including neurologists, dementia was not something that was included or required while they were going through their studies. That dementia is, and probably is still considered, an elective. So it's not an area when someone's going through college trying to get their degree because they want to practice medicine and then eventually they want to have their own practice, and it's the idea of making money, and then the insurance gets involved, and we don't have the time to sit down and get into these details and actually admit and say, I don't know, because we haven't known enough. And since we're always putting those reasonings on, it was something else. They just didn't sleep good. They didn't eat good. They haven't exercised in a while, or they had a bad day. We keep putting these reasons for it. We don't really look into it further until something drastically happens, and then we have to. Or it's just like you had said, he was forgetting how to write checks and doing things that he had done for years.
Yeah. Um, it was it was kind of strange. It was our and no, it was my birthday, '09, and I said, Matt usually writes a poem to me. He didn't write anything, so I thought maybe he was mad at me. I gave him money to buy me Christmas gifts, and he hardly brought me anything. And I said, Matt, why didn't you go shopping? I know now. I knew afterwards. He didn't know how. He didn't know how. But I didn't know that then.
Right, right.
It's, after the fact. His driving was terrible. I took his car away after he backed it up in the driveway and scratched the whole side and didn't even know about that. Okay. I should have had the doctor be the enemy with that one, but I had to take his keys away.
Right, right. I had to do the same.
Yeah, and he had trouble reading. Matt loved to read, and he had trouble reading, and he had to give up teaching Sunday school. He said the letters, the words would jump around. And I thought that was interesting. And I told his primary doctor, they finally had a pre-screening where you draw the clock.
Right.
I think in 2018, they might have started that. And I said, a little too late for Matt, don't you think?
Yeah.
Should have had this back in 2010. He rolled his eyes and he goes, oh, Betsy, there's nothing I could have done for Matt anyway. And I said, well, you could have listened to us.
Yeah, that's true. That would have saved a lot of time and frustration. And there might have been something they could have done that would have helped him.
Could have believed us. Just to acknowledge, yeah, he does have a dementia.
Right.
And yes, you can, get it young. And now they're realizing this. With hospice, the problem I had with them, that they didn't believe me as the caregiver. Matt was terminally agitated. I knew he was dying. I knew it. They didn't know that. I knew it. And I told the hospice nurse, Matt's dying. And I'd call up. The medicine's not working. She told me, no, he's not dying. He's walking, talking. You call what he's doing walking? Okay, but not really walking. And I said, I'm telling you, he's dying. 2 weeks later, Matt was gone. The social worker, who was very nasty, came to my house to question me. Made it seem like it was my fault and Matt was agitated, and she messed with the wrong woman.
Oh, wow.
She talked to me like I was stupid, talking down to me. And I said, Kathy, you need to change your attitude and your tone with me, because I'm not stupid. I am a licensed practical nurse. I give medication. Don't talk to me like I don't know what I'm doing. She looked at me and she goes, well, I'm not talking to you like that. I said, well, I think you are. You better change your attitude. She had the nerve. She had the nerve to tell me I call up hospice too much. No one calls as much as I do. I said, you know what? I don't care. I'm my husband's advocate. And I will call as much as I want to until there's a solution, which is what I'm looking for, to his problem. I'm telling you, medicine's not working, and you're ordering more of the same. And does it make sense? And she goes, well, if he goes up to one of our facilities and gets his meds straightened, you can't do what you want to do. And I said, well, first of all, I'm not putting him in one of your facilities that wouldn't be safe for him.
Right.
And I know, how to give medicine. I told her Matt had a headache. Matt told me as plain as day, Jessica, my head hurts. She had the nerve to tell me he doesn't really have a headache. That's a Seroquel giving him noises in his head. I said, really? who are you to say that? How do you know what a dying brain feels like?
Yeah.
Nobody knows.
No one,
I'm
and that's
sure.
the problem. No one knows.
Yeah. So I gave him Tylenol, but just to blow off that Matt was in pain. Why do they think people with dementia don't have pain? If they had pain before, especially if they had pain before they had dementia, they had like a comorbid problem like arthritis,
Mm-hmm.
they're going to be in pain with dementia.
Right.
That doesn't take away their pain. And, I was, they were messing with the wrong person. They thought I was this meek little housewife. They found out they would not even come out. Matt fell twice and they would not come out to assess him. Wouldn't even come out. No follow-up. And I blew my stack when Matt fell the second time. And I gave the medication like they told me. He took that whole night, fell out of bed, called up the hospice. And I said, gave exactly what you said. Matt talked the whole night. I need help. I'm having chest pain. Matt fell out of bed. He's still agitated. Are you going to come out and assess him? You know what the nurse told me? She said she had the nerve to say to me, I don't know. I said, what do you mean you don't know? I'm telling you he fell. He needs help. I need help. And I said, well, you know what? I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to call you every minute until you know what you're going to do. And what I'm going to do is I'm calling up your regional manager and I'm going to place a complaint. I'm calling up Medicare to place a complaint and get my husband out of this hospice. Oh, don't do that, Mrs. Sloan. That's my married name, Sloan. I'll call up my nurse manager. So she called up her nurse manager. Matt went up to the hospice unit later that night. They thought he was just going up to get his medicine situated. I knew he went up there to die. I told Josh, our son, that Daddy's not coming home. He's going to go to his heavenly home. Yeah. And after 2 days there, they said to me, Betsy, now we see what you're talking about.
Oh, wow.
Well, I said, why don't you believe me? I had a talk with that director of hospice. And I told her, I called her up before, and she said she'd like to meet with me. And I told her, unacceptable. Then she goes, well, I'm sorry, Betsy. This usually doesn't happen if somebody dropped the ball. I said, well, you know what, Carmela? My husband's not a ball, number one. Number two, if it was your husband, you'd have a fit, because I know how nurses are, because I was one.
Right.
And I know nobody on this floor would accept treatment like that. Unacceptable. Don't expect me to accept it. It's unacceptable to me.
Yeah, absolutely. That is disappointing when you go to someone for help and that's their response, especially when they're the ones that are supposed to be the natural route for help, and that's their response.
Yeah, I was very disappointed. I think it's wonderful when people do have a wonderful hospice experience. That's what it should be. Right. That's what it's supposed to be. Right. Not like what I had from hell. The hospital experience was much better than the home experience. Okay. The nurses were pretty good, except for one I didn't like. But they actually, people would come in to see who I was because I caused a tsunami. And they actually, the social worker, one of them, called me on Christmas Eve day, Jessica, to tell me, Christmas Eve day, to tell me Matt would be going home on the weekend. I said, really, Mary? I don't think so. How can he go home if he's so agitated and taking IV medication? Mm-hmm. Oh, he's going to get off of that and he's going to get medicines by mouth. And we'll monitor him. I said, well, let me tell you, Mary, let me know when he goes on that and I'll monitor him myself. And if I don't think he's safe for discharge, I would not take him at home. I refuse to take him home unsafe. She said, you can't do that. I said, try me. Try me. I know Matt's right. Then am I right? I will call it Medicare And I will tell them I'm not taking that home. It is unsafe. And I will tell them to slap a fine on you.
Yeah.
She's saying, oh, you need a doctor's order. So I don't care what I need. I'm telling you what I'm going to do. You can't make me take him home. I refuse to take him home. And I'm not going. She goes, calm down.
Boy, thank goodness he had you as his advocate. Most caregivers wouldn't know what to do in that situation, and they would actually follow whatever they call their protocol and take their loved one home, only to get home and find out they're in more deeper under than they were before they left the hospital.
I know. I mean, there's a lot of people who don't have advocates, and when they thought that he was going to go home, and I knew he wasn't going to, I went into the director of hospice again. I said, Carmela, I don't think Matt's going home, but in the event that he should, and I said, if an RN doesn't come out, so help me. If a nurse doesn't come out when I think he needs one, my next call is to the CEO of this hospital. And don't think I won't do it, because I will.
Right.
I definitely will. She gave me her card and she said, Betsy, you call me 24/7. Nurse doesn't show up. And she goes, why didn't you call me before? And I said, well, your name's not in the handbook.
Interesting. As you heard straight from Betsy, how frustrating and heartbreaking a caregiver's life can become. It's easy to blame the doctors, nurses, and even hospice companies in some cases. But the main point here is we are all in this together. Each of us has a role to play, and most of the time we may not want to. Most of the time it's because it's hard to say, I don't know, while other times we know exactly what to say, but face too much industry red tape. If this episode spoke to your heart, then you're going to want to check out our follow-up interview with Betsy as we discuss whether dementia should be a public health priority. Thank you for joining in and listening today. You can find more about this topic on the blog at www.proactivecaregiver.com. I hope this gave you more food for thought. And until next time, be proactive. Take care, everybody.
Thank you for joining us today. We really hope you've enjoyed this episode. To learn more about proactive caregiving and to hear other episodes of this podcast, please visit www.jessicalazelcannon.com. This podcast is produced by Cannon Light Media, LLC, www.cannonlightmedia.com. Music provided by Chris Paradise.